and to give meaning to what we'll keep doing. So with that in mind, I want to talk about what's happening this week, not just at Temple, but more in depth about Purim, give it some meaning for ourselves and for our lives, and reflect on that with all of you. And I say reflect on it with all of you because I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask questions today. So if you're on the YouTube link, and if you're on Facebook, you can flip over to YouTube link and you can drop questions in there. And Brian Fishman, who is our executive director at Temple and is behind the scenes helping, as he always does, on Monday Morning Musings and on so many other things. Shout out to Brian. Thank you. He's going to look at those questions and throw them my way. So let's talk about Purim for a moment and how we observe it. First of all, it falls on the 14th day of Adar, which is on sundown, beginning on Thursday night and Friday during the day. So our celebrations often are about our children, like the carnival we had yesterday in the parking lot where cars drove through and the characters of Purim were there, Mordechai, Hashveros, and Vashti and Esther and Haman, who almost forgot. And Saturday afternoon, we had fun with the little ones. But the reality is that Purim is something that we adults can enjoy as well and is a part of our celebration and our perspective in our lives. So at Temple on Thursday, on the evening of Purim, we're going to delve deeper into the text and the story and share in some craft cocktails as well and enjoy that too. That's why we have, yes, because the theme is mules. And I'm going to teach you a little bit about why mules are a part of the actual story in Megillat Esther and why we chose these craft cocktails for our night of fun. And you can still sign up today on our website because we'll be offering you the provisions to pick up in advance Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. But you got to sign up today before we go and have them all delivered to us, the things we need for it. Saturday night is our little spiel, a retelling of the story to the music of Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. And of course, lastly, one of the things we do during Purim is Mishloach Manot, the giving of gifts, of things to cheer other people and to bring joy into their lives. And you can sign up for those and have them delivered to whoever you like, of all different price increments, and a chocolate one and a snacking one and a party one. You can sign up online for that too. And the money raised through that is supporting the Fruman Youth Program, SISTI, our youth group at Temple Shir Shalom. So great to do that. So let's talk about Purim for a few moments. And Megillat Esther and the scroll of Esther in our Tanakh and our Bible. It happened sometime in the 4th, 5th century BCE. And what we know, well, the reality is we know very little of these individuals that are in the story. Mordechai, Esther, King Ahasuerus, Haman, Vashti, the ones we mentioned before, except what we find in the Megillat Esther in the Bible, because we don't have any other historical documents, record of these characters, of these rulers, of these advisors, of these individuals. Traditional commentary says that Ahasuerus was probably Xerxes, who was the ruler in the area of Persia after Darius the Great, but we don't know that for sure. You know, historians will say we have to have more than one form of evidence to prove something as well. Interesting though, Josephus talks about it in the Laws of Judaism. It's in the 2nd century, dedicated to how we celebrate it. And much of some of those same traditions are what we follow today. Now, I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying there's no other historical record of it. Of course, the man named Moses isn't mentioned anywhere in history except for in our Bible. So am I saying that the splitting of the Sea of Reeds didn't happen? No, I'm just saying we don't have it in history. Difference between history and faith, of course. But this story is filled with a lot that maybe our ancestors want us to hold on to, a story about a community of Jews in Persia living in diaspora in a world where they were not the majority, kicked out of Israel in that time period still, right? The temple was under construction, it seems, during that period because Cyrus the Great, who was the ruler of Persia after the falling of the Babylonian Empire, helped the Jews rebuild the temple, sent us back to Israel. So people could live in Israel at the time, or they chose to live in diaspora. And so what is important in diaspora? Well, one story in here is about Jewish identity, that we can make our voice heard. We have a role in this world, that living in diaspora, we're a minority, we proclaim our identity loud and proud. Another story is that we shouldn't have to hide our identity, right? Why do we wear costumes besides the joy that it brings to us? The idea that we can take our masks off. And so How many times in history have we been told to not open our doors, right? To keep ourselves hidden as Jews. Here, the story, Esther reveals her identity. We too take our masks off at the end of the day and celebrate who we are, saying we never should have to hide our identity. Story, as well as we read it in a modern lens of women's rights, combating sexism and oppression, right? And the ideas of what is wrong in the story that we talk about and what is right in the story and what Esther is able to do, right? So both how she's treated as a young woman, how Vashti's treated the wrong, what she celebrates at the end is able to conquer is the right? The celebration of the feminine is another part of this story too, a link to the fertility goddess within. If you want, you can ask questions. We can go there if you'd like. And there's some interesting things because some say that this story is grabbed from other traditions, referring to the goddess Ishtar, fertility goddess, and the god Marduk, different idolatrous, different ideas of pagan worship that would be a part of other traditions that Judaism, our faith, may have brought in. We could talk more about that if you like. Also, how we turn to God without actually saying God. God is not mentioned anywhere in the book, the scroll of Esther. Only book of the Bible where God is not mentioned. Right now, just because God is not mentioned doesn't mean God is not part of the story. And so we can find that within there as well. When Esther is preparing herself for the approaching of the king to ask and to say what's going to happen, right? And to be protected, she asks the people to pray, to fast for 3 days, right? To repent in a sense. And Mordecai goes and says this as well. Goes around the community, say, hey, there's going to be this pogrom against the Jews. We have to fast in preparation so that we can hopefully overcome this. There's also the message that are we ever really safe in diaspora, right? That we have to be careful. And when we live in a minority, there's always a threat. And so the importance of being in the majority, the importance of our survival is the establishment of the state of Israel. And so that is how we will be safe. And last, there's also the idea of how we celebrate this holiday. That it's the one time during the year that we are commanded, according to Jewish law, to drink and drink so much that we don't know the difference between cursed be Haman and blessed be Mordecai. That's pretty intense to lose that perspective between the hero and the villain, right? Yes, drinking, raising a glass of wine is a part of our celebration of holidays. 4 glasses of wine on Pesach, that's not drunkenness. That's a long period of time where it's spread out. But today in traditional communities, especially, you'll see in Israel bottles of ouzo, of vodka, going through the rows of the aisles of the synagogues as people listen to the story being read in the Megillat Esther, right? And then there's also the story of don't mess with us. And how is that part of the story? Well, that's one of the most interesting things because we know this beautiful story, the story of a time when there arose Haman who wanted to do away with us Jews because we wouldn't bow down. We only bow down to God. The question of Mordecai, was he tempting this? Was he provoking this? And what this means. But of course, how Mordecai goes to his niece, the queen, Esther, and says, reveal your identity, stand up for our people, tell the king what's going to happen. And then the king says, oh my God, this is horrible. And then appoints Mordecai to be the one in charge. And Haman is hanged on the gallows he's made for the Jews, and his sons are as well. We sort of leave the story at that, right? We don't talk about the end of the story, but I want to share with you the actual Megillat Esther, the text, and want to look at that together because that's one of the most fascinating things that in our pediatric telling of the story with our children, we never go there. But today we're going to for a few minutes because in the last chapter of the Megillat Esther, it says, the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also the month of Adar. Right? Remember that Purim means lots, and Haman drew lots to see what day this pogrom, murdering of Jews, would happen. 13th day of Adar is drawn. So now it hasn't happened. So the next day, the 14th day, is going to be our day of celebration. The 14th day of Adar, and they slew 300 men in Shushan. But on the spoil, they laid not their hands. Right? Jump on down. Slew and it stood for their lives, had rest from their enemies, and they slew of them that hated them 75,000 in the king's provinces. Our ancestors, according to the story, slew 75,000 people. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not something necessarily I want to celebrate, that my ancestors killed 75,000, even if they were our enemies, right? We're told in the Torah that if you happen upon your enemy's animal, his ox, his donkey, that you help that animal and you return it to your enemy. We're told to build bridges, but here we slaughter them. And the question is, why would that be in the text? Is that part of our history? And you would think if our ancestors 2,300 years ago had killed 75,000 people plus who had been a threat to them, that would be something recorded in history outside the Megillat Esther. And I argue that this is another example. Not only did the story not happen, but that the story is all a homiletic teaching us something about how we live our lives, right? It's saying, don't mess with us. It's telling that we Jews are going to be a minority community in diaspora. And so we're strong. God's on our side. We're mighty. Look what happens when you threaten us. And the idea that it gives us strength, one, telling the story to a people who've been downtrodden to lift us up and say, listen, there's hope. Look what we can accomplish. Look what we do. But even more to anyone who might threaten us to say, hey, this is what will happen if you threaten us. And the idea that we have strength in our ability to call on God, and our ability to stay together as a people, and our ability to support one another. And I think that's a pretty powerful message, but it's really interesting in the way it's told in our tradition. And so it makes us uncomfortable because it's not who we want to necessarily be, and it's not who we are going to aspire to as far as killing off people who threaten us. Right. So I think it's an important way to look at that story, too, and a recognition of why it may be there. And you know what? There may be some truth, some fact in the story, right? Maybe it happened a much smaller version. It wasn't a king, but it was a ruler, and it happened in a much smaller way. So it's not really told in history, and it got aggrandized over time and then written into the scroll of Esther as we know it today. So, hey, we're blessed because it became a part of our tradition. Pretty soon thereafter, or whenever, by the 2nd century, it's a part of who we are, and it continues to be that. But I always encourage that it's not a children's holiday alone. Yes, it's fun, it's great being in costumes, but it's awesome for us to enjoy that too. So jump into one of the ways you can at Temple to celebrate Purim this week and enjoy it with us. Look, we need time, we need moments, we need opportunities to bring laughter into our days. And I think that's what Purim is helping us with as well. So please be a part of that. Jump on and have fun. If you haven't signed up yet for the text study that we'll go into on Thursday, along with the tasting of these fun things, we'll enjoy that together. And last, want to give a shout out to Bob Coffrin, whose birthday it is today, because I know his wife is definitely watching this morning. So happy birthday, Bob. Love when we get to learn those things about someone whose birthday it is. And thank you for being a part of another week, Monday